A very good morning to you and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Life and Style. It's Monday. That means we're all about inspiration and we call it Inspiration Monday. From motivate, books and blogs to the kitchen and beyond this board, all of that packaged together to make you a better person, to improve you on different aspects of your life. Now to start us off is Motivate. And today we are at the Alliance Francaise and we're here to meet a guy called Donovan. He is the co-founder of the African Heritage Pan-African Galleries, and he is also promoter and a catalyst, I think, for lack of a better word, a catalyst for art and culture throughout Africa and the rest of the world as well. And he is also the guy behind what we all know as the Maasai markets. How about we go have a talk with Donovan. Alan, thank you so much for availing yourself and creating time for us on Life and Style. So this particular segment is called Motivate, and we try to draw inspirations from people's lives, from what they do, how they've lived their life, and their works and everything. And your work speaks for yourself. And we're actually honored to meet you and also learn more about our culture as not just a state, but also as a continent, that is Africa. Maybe you can tell us what brought you to Africa and when was this?
I've always wanted to come to Africa. My first scrapbook when I was 4 years old was on Africa, mostly African animals. And I went through college, got 3 degrees, and my main aim was to go to Africa. And I made applications to the US State Department, and I was accepted in 2 different programs. And I got in the wrong program, so they put me in as a computer operator first.
Okay. What was the right program?
1966. Computers were as big as this room. But so I got out of that and finally was assigned to the Nigerian desk. And I was the last American to go to Nigeria because of the Nigerian Biafra War.
Yes.
I arrived July 4th, 1967, American Independence Day.
That's such a coincidence.
At the American Embassy in Accra, which had one of the first Black American ambassadors, Franklin Williams. And then I went on to Nigeria. I became relief officer for the United States government to try to feed people in Biafra that were starving. And that wasn't very successful, and I quit after 2 years. Decided I didn't want to be a bureaucrat. I bought a Volkswagen bus in Paris. I drove across the Sahara
Desert,
where I saw many more forms of pre-colonial architecture, which inspired me to start studying pre-colonial architecture. And then I drove across the Congo from Nigeria to Kenya.
All right.
I arrived in 1970, and I got a permit to travel up to the northern frontier of Kenya, because I wanted to see part of Kenya that was not so colonized, like Nairobi.
Okay.
And I stayed there for 3 months. I was so fascinated by all the wonderful designs that the Turkana and other peoples had, and in such a harsh environment that they lived in, and such beautiful objects that I started collecting them.
Yeah.
And I sold my bus. I made a collection.
This is your first collection?
Yes.
Okay.
Made my first collection on artifacts from the northern frontier, mostly Turkana.
Okay.
I had an exhibition in Nairobi, and the only African who showed up was Joseph Marumbi.
The only African who showed up.
Who was a very...
That was the second vice president of our country.
He was the second vice president, the first foreign minister.
Yeah.
And he said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Well, probably look for a job." And he said, "Would you go back to the northern frontier and make a collection for me?" And I thought that was very noble that he would want to preserve his country's culture, so I said, "Yes, I'll do that." So that was our first meeting.
Okay.
I went back to Turkana. At that time, the Turkana would take me on crocodile hunts and give me
Crocodile hunt.
full sets of crocodile teeth, python vertebrae, ostrich eggshell, all the things they use to make jewelry.
Wow.
And I decided I wanted to make jewelry, so I went down to Mombasa. I met a Peace Corps volunteer from the U.S. that had started Bombolulu,
Yeah.
which still exists, but at that time it was for training people who'd been in very bad accidents, like fires and motor accidents. The only requirement was you had to have one arm or one leg. Many of the people were blind,
Okay.
so I joined that class, and I brought down all my things from Nigeria and Ghana, small things, put them together with the Turkana things. And a woman came in one day and she was literally tearing out her hair. She was so excited about my jewelry. So she convinced me to go back to Nairobi and have my second exhibition,
Okay.
which was called African Heritage Jewelry. And
How did that go? Did we have more Africans at the exhibition?
no, a wealthy Texan walked in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, started pulling everything off the wall.
Whoa.
And I said, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to sell all these.
Yeah.
He said, but I want them all. I want the boards, I want the walls, I want this room. And he bought the whole room, shipped it to Dallas, Texas. He took it on a 3-year tour of the United States through all the major galleries like Neiman Marcus galleries, Bergdorf Goodman's in New York, and so on. And I remember when at the exhibition his wife came in and she said, George, I only have one neck.
I can't wear all of them.
And he said, these are not for you.
Oh.
She said, well, who are they for? And he said, well, have you ever seen anything like these? So she sat down on the floor, started reading my cards and things. Said, no, I haven't. So they took it to Texas. They changed their swimming pool, made it into a storeroom. And the cabanas around the pool, they made into packing areas. And he said, now I want you to get busy because I want to represent you. So I came back to Kenya and rented a horse stables,
Okay.
Mombasa Road, and I employed some young craftspeople I met, and we started producing jewelry for export. And Murumbi came in one day and he was very agitated. You know, Murumbi had a terrible temper.
He did?
And he said, I said, what's wrong with you? And he said, well, why did you do that to me? And I said, do what? And he said, well, I went by a shop in Nairobi today, owned by an Indian, and I saw a huge mask in the window. And I went in and I said to the shopkeeper, where did you get that? And he said, Alan Donovan sold it to me. He said, you knew I wanted that mask. You knew
And you
I'd seen
sold it.
And why would you do that to me? I'm a collector. I'm the reason why you stayed in Kenya.
True.
And I said, well, I was out of money and I couldn't, I lost track of you and I'm sorry. So let's go see the man. And we
Try to
both
buy
knew
it
him.
back?
And I'll get my money back and you can have it. And we did that, and that's how African Heritage started, because that day he said, it's my dream to set up a Pan-African gallery.
Yeah.
Because I've collected all over Africa where I've set up missions and embassies. And you know, I have a very big collection in my basement. And I'd like to make a center in Nairobi where Africans from all parts of the continent could show their works and also their tradition and culture. And would you help me do that?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'll stay another year. So then I was so busy, I was exporting jewelry, then I had to rent a shop on Kenyatta Avenue, and then I had to go to 20 African countries, buy stock and meet artists. And so I was terribly busy.
Yeah.
My first secretary said, my father has built me a house because I'm getting married, but I don't need that house because my fiance is a wealthy man and he bought me an island in the West Indies.
Okay.
So would you like to look at that house? So I drove out to look at the house, which is now where Mololongo is now. There was no other house there then. And I said, no, it's too far. And she said something about you'll get used to it. And I said, oh, no, no. But then when I walked through the house and I saw the beautiful view of the Nairobi National Park, I'd been thinking of finding a place to build my house based on African pre-colonial architecture. So I said, this is it. So I slept on the floor there for a year.
For a year?
Because I didn't have time to. Most of the time I didn't even get home. I would sleep on the floor of my office.
Okay.
But because I was so busy.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. But I'd like to know why Kenya? I mean, you'd traveled Africa, I mean, all the way from Nigeria
well, it was
to Congo.
an accident.
Yeah.
Most of my life has been an accident, but it was really Joseph Morumbi and his vision and his dream that kept me here.
And you know, collecting all these things, I mean, coming to Kenya, you collected all over Africa, but also majorly in Kenya because you were here for the longest time. Are we still doing that? Did you find a lot of people doing what you were doing and over the years?
Well, there's a lot of people who've copied African heritage designs and still continue to do so. You know, when African heritage was at its heyday, I had over 500 employees full time.
Whoa.
And I had over 5,000 who were supplying items on a sale or return basis commission. So, no, nothing's ever reached what African heritage did. It's a shame what happened to Kenyatta Avenue Gallery because when we opened that gallery on Kenyatta Avenue, we had 600 people every single day. Why? Because that's what the fire department would allow me to have in.
Yeah.
I had people lining up around the block, waiting to get in, and as one person would leave, another person would come in. That's the way it was for 20 years.
Wow.
And then when Nairobi became so insecure due to bad governance, and I no longer could do that because the hotels put up signs, do not walk alone, get a taxi. And so people no longer walked from the Norfolk or the Hilton. Well, I had a fire that burned down African heritage in 1976. We lost everything.
And then how did you pick up from that? Because most of the people who are probably leaving or building their dream
well,
would
1976, I was planning on leaving to set up a gallery in New York.
Okay.
But we had a fire caused by the telephone, which stopped me in my tracks because we lost it all.
Yeah.
I found Marumbi sitting in the ashes, and he said, we must rebuild, we must rebuild. So he sold part of his collection to pay for rebuilding to the Kenya government. And he even sold his house.
Yeah.
They came to him and said, we don't have any place to display this, can we buy your house?
Yeah.
And he said, only if you make it into the Morumbi Institute of African Research.
Yeah.
And keep it and buy the adjoining property and expand it with a hostel, with a kitchen, and a library. And he got UNESCO to agree to do all that, but the government did nothing. Wow. The house was allowed to deteriorate until it fell down.
Yeah.
And the things were moved out of it into the basement of the present archive. So he died a very broken-hearted man when he saw that they were cutting down his indigenous trees and nothing was left of his dream of an African studies, Morumbi African Studies Center.
That's pretty sad. That's pretty sad, but I think we should be able to do something now. But looking at the other African states that you've been and Africa as a whole, is it just Kenya that we're not preserving our culture, or is it across Africa?
Well, I think it's across Africa. It's a shame. The name of this exhibition we're having here is The Vanishing Textiles of
The
Africa,
vanishing textiles.
because most of these fabrics are extinct. They're no longer made. Many of them are endangered. There's few people that devote all the time to make this handmade fabrics. They're very labor intensive. So many young Kenyans and Africans growing up now, they didn't realize what a great heritage they had. So it's all gone already.
What is that thing that we need to do
Well,
now
the
as
reason
a
I
country?
brought Nikki 77, could you hand me that? Maybe we can.
Yeah.
This is the lady who's devoted her life to rehabilitating African textiles, especially Nigerian textiles. And she's given several thousand young Nigerians jobs to make these beautiful fabrics. And she's going to give a lecture here during this exhibition.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think African textiles was the greatest gift Africa gave to the world of art. Their textiles were spectacular, they were unique, and now nobody wants them.
No more. You're also big in music, and African Heritage had a couple of bands under its wing.
We had
One we
many
know of
bands.
is
My
Jabali
first
Africa.
one was Musio Tunya. Smoke the Thunders. They were from Zambia. That was the first band I used with my shows. And then I realized I needed a permanent band to travel with me around the world with my troupe of models and dancers and musicians and chefs and hairdressers. So I formed the African Heritage Band with Job Seda.
Yeah.
Who was the leading musician at the time in Nairobi. And he and his group traveled with me for years. And then he went on his own. He's now probably the leading Kenyan musician worldwide. He's still traveling with his Titi. And he only plays traditional instruments. He threw away his other instruments. And he has a protege now named Pampion, who also threw away his instruments. He makes his own instruments based on musical instruments that are thousands of years old.
That's very
So, and he writes all his own music. So he's one of the few musicians on the African continent that's actually trying to revive music and find a new kind of music rather than hip hop and rap.
Yeah.
And so he's one of the few musicians that's really trying to unearth the old African music. And then I had Jabali Africa. I left them in Philadelphia, where they still are.
Yeah.
And I had Musically Speaking, which took over for some time from African Heritage. Then I had Taffy Dancers, which you can see at the National Theater all the time.
Yeah.
So I had many.
They had very, very unique, and like you said, they were playing African music with African instruments. The influence from the West has been quite a huge hit to us. So most people are switching to that. What would you say? Do we have enough in terms of the people who left the country? Are they coming back to teach and mentor?
Well, Jabali was coming back, and they were going to set up their own club. But I don't know what happened. I guess the grass is greener on the other side. They stayed in the U.S. They've been there since 1995.
Yeah.
But
Seda.
yeah, it's too bad that more people don't encourage authentic Kenyan or African music.
Yeah, you were also big in terms of showcasing our fashion in terms of fabric to the world, and talk about Miss Africa, Miss Kenya, and all of that under
Well,
your
that
wing as
started way back in
Yeah.
1972. I did a huge Nigerian festival
well. Nigerian festival,
in
yes.
Nairobi. That's what I'm redoing this year, 50
Okay.
years later. And that was very successful with Nigerian music and Nigerian art and Nigerian food and so on. Then I had a Madagascar festival. I traveled the whole island up and down Madagascar. I did several Madagascar festivals. It's a shame to lose that tradition, that great heritage. And some of the younger people who come to my house, which is a national monument now,
Yeah, it is.
they are very keen about learning more about their heritage, but I don't know what to tell you about how that they can produce something more from that than just a novelty.
It's true, it is. It comes from within. Nobody can just up and start doing this. And probably it's not something that you can go to school for, to learn how to do these things. But maybe we can talk about the home, the house, the African Heritage House, and how it's become a monument, and why we are actually here at the Alliance Francaise, because you're somehow giving back by bringing some things from the house to...
Well, two reasons.
Yeah.
What happened to Marumbi and his miserable heritage, his misfortune.
Okay.
He wanted to preserve his house as a center for African studies. So I would like to do something on his behalf to create an African Studies Center at my house, connected with Strathmore or another university. And, you know, I don't think that the colleges in Kenya give enough emphasis on African studies. Like Strathmore, they teach law,
Business.
they teach business. There's a little humanities department, but there's no really African studies. So I think this is a shame, and that's why we're sitting here talking. We say, what can we do?
Yeah.
There's not enough being done to promote the study of African history and art and culture. So,
More needs to be done. More needs to be done. Let's talk about your book, My Journey Through African Heritage. I totally love the cover. This must have been the first edition.
well, that's an accident too. Everything I do is
Are
an
you
accident.
serious? This is an accident?
Yeah, I first of all started to do a paperback, like the one here. I was going to do a paperback, and
There you go.
this is inside that book. It's the first thing you see in here. That's the,
There you go.
and they didn't have a press in Kenya that could make it strong enough that the pages didn't fall out. So
What to do?
I had to do something, so I designed a book cover with bark cloth from the Royal Buganda traditional clothing.
Okay.
This from the Maasai. This is batik bone that I introduced to Kenya many years ago. Now many people are
All right.
doing it.
Okay.
So this book I put into a new cover, had it hand stitched. Now I've done two new editions. One, a good soft back that you can carry around and it doesn't fall apart. And I'm very thankful for that.
So as we come to the end of this conversation, what will be your word of advice, you know, as a sort of motivation?
Well, I wish I could give you an answer, but I carry on with festivals and exhibitions like the one I'm having here.
Yeah.
And I hope that young people that attend will see the value of carrying on in their own lives,
Yeah.
wearing things that are traditional or African, instead of accepting everything from overseas, from the U.S. or from
China.
China.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult because those things are much cheaper and money speaks and rules the world.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Can we get these books in the shelves and where and how much are they for?
This bark cloth edition is hand bound. You can get a Textbook Center, Nairobi Sarita, and a few other places. And then the paperback I'm hoping to get into schools.
Wow, that's really nice. And how much is it going for?
This is $100.
Okay. Well, there you go. You know where you can get this book at $100. That's what, about 1,000, Bob? No, about 10,000. About 10,000. About 10,000 Kenya shillings. Go ahead, and there's so much knowledge in here. So go ahead and grab yourself a copy. Thank you so much for making time, Alan, and all the best about the festival. What are the dates again?
It opened, the grand opening was at the Nairobi Gallery in the OPC's office on October 1st, which is Nigeria's National Day, which is why we had that day. And then we have a simultaneous opening at the National Museums of Kenya, another big gallery. And this exhibition is going to open on the 9th at the French Cultural Center. And it's going to last until the 29th.
Wow.
So we have the whole ground floor and second floor devoted to African textiles from African Heritage House.
Absolutely. So you have the dates now. Make sure you create time. Pass by the Alliance Francaise and see what you've been missing in terms of textiles, in terms of fabrics from Africa. Basically, so come see some of, like this particular one, he said is going extinct. So you need to definitely give this place a tour. This has been Motivate for You. We're taking a very short commercial break. We'll be right back with Books and Blogs with Catherine Mwangi, and we have Beyond the Sport and the Kitchen. Don't go too far. We'll be right back.
Hello, how are you doing? So today I'm right here with Kate, and we're going to do a bit of poetry.